They were the twin faces of Hong Kong's forbidden cinema. Today, one face hides behind the gates of a billionaire's mansion, scrubbed clean of its past. The other stares down the cameras at Can wearing her history like armor. Chingmy Yau chose to erase the Category 3 stain through a strategic marriage. Shu Qi chose to outrun it through art. 2 queens, 2 strategies. One question: who actually survived? The Hong Kong of the 1990s was a city hyper-accelerated by anxiety. The British colonial government and the People's Republic of China had signed the Joint Declaration in 1984, setting the date for the handover, July 1st, 1997. This date hung over the city like a guillotine blade suspended by a fraying rope. For the people of Hong Kong, specifically the filmmakers, financiers, and gangsters who ran the entertainment underworld, 1997 wasn't just a political transfer of power, it was a deadline. The prevailing mood was a frantic, nihilistic hedonism. It was the philosophy of borrowed place, borrowed time. If the party was going to end, if the censors from Beijing were coming to shut down the lights, then the goal was to burn as brightly, as loudly, and as profitably as possible before the clock struck midnight. The economy was exploding, fueled by real estate speculation and a stock market that defied gravity. Money was flowing through the streets of Tsim Sha Tsui like water, and the film industry was the bucket catching every drop. This was the Wild East. Regulations were suggestions, safety protocols were non-existent, and copyright laws were a joke. In this chaotic ferment, the Hong Kong government inadvertently created a monster. In 1988, in an attempt to modernize and regulate the unruly content of cinema, the motion picture rating system was introduced. It was a 3-tier system: Category 1 for general audiences, Category 2 for restricted, and Category 3 strictly for persons aged 18 and older. The bureaucrats intended Category 3 to be a quarantine zone, a bin for content deemed too grotesque or explicit for the general public. They thought it would marginalize such films. They were wrong. They had underestimated the hunger of the Hong Kong male. Instead of a warning label, Category 3 became a seal of quality for the forbidden. It legitimized the illicit. Suddenly, you didn't have to go to a seedy underground theater to see adult content. You could go to a mainstream cinema, buy a ticket, and watch a high production value film that promised shocks, violence, and nudity. The floodgates opened. Between 1988 and the mid-90s, the Cat 3 film became a genre unto itself, as distinct and codified as the American Western or the Japanese samurai film. But unlike those genres which were defined by heroism or history, Category 3 was defined by excess. It wasn't just about sex, it was about the violation of taboos. Films like The Untold Story, 1993, or Dr. Lamb, 1992, mixed extreme, nauseating violence with dark comedy and eroticism. They reflected the collective psyche of a city on the verge of a nervous breakdown. The audiences, stressed by the uncertainty of the future and the cramping density of the city, craved catharsis. They wanted to see the worst of humanity reflected on screen because reality felt just as precarious. But the most lucrative vein of this genre was the erotic thriller. This was the trap that lay in wait for our protagonists. Producers loved these films for a simple reason. The economics were unbeatable. You didn't need expensive special effects. You didn't need to blow up cars or hire Jackie Chan for $5 million. All you needed was a script that could be written in a week, a cheap location, and, crucially, a female lead willing to disrobe. The profit margins were astronomical. A film made for a few $100,000 Hong Kong dollars could gross tens of millions. It was a gold rush, and the pickaxes were the bodies of young women. This brings us to the dark heart of the industry, the triads. By the 1990s, organized crime had infiltrated every level of the Hong Kong film business. They weren't just extorting protection money. They were the producers. Gangsters realized that laundering money through film production was easy and glamorous. They brought their brutal tactics to the casting couch. Stories from this era are chilling. Actors were kidnapped and forced to finish scenes at gunpoint. Managers were beaten for refusing to lend their stars to certain productions. For a young actress, saying no was not always a matter of career strategy. Sometimes, it was a matter of physical safety. The line between voluntarily signing a contract and coercion was blurred by debt, threats, and the sheer power imbalance between a teenage girl and a room full of men with dragon tattoos. Even without the direct threat of violence, the psychological pressure was immense. The industry sold a compelling lie. This is art. Directors would tell hesitant actresses, look at Veronica Yip, look at Loletta Lee. They did it, and now they are huge stars. They presented nudity not as exploitation, but as a rite of passage, a breakthrough for a serious actress willing to sacrifice for her craft. But the reality was a pink trap. While a handful of actresses used Category 3 as a stepping stone to mainstream success, the vast majority were consumed by it. The moment an actress stripped on camera, a stamp was placed on her forehead by Hong Kong society. She became impure. The conservative Chinese culture, which prized modesty and face, viewed these women with a schizophrenic gaze. Men would line up around the block to buy tickets to see them, yet they would forbid their sons from marrying them. They were desired in the dark and despised in the light. The actresses lived in a glass house of judgment. The tabloids, the most vicious in the world, would dissect their bodies, speculate on their morals, and invent scandals to sell papers. If an actress tried to put her clothes back on and do a serious drama, the critics would sneer. Who does she think she is? They would ask. We've seen everything she has to offer. This was the machine, a low-cost, high-yield meat grinder run by gangsters and opportunists, fueled by the anxieties of a dying colony, and built on the backs of women who were told that their only asset was their sexuality. Sitting at the control panel of this machine was a man named Wong Jing. He was the king of trash, the god of gamblers, the most commercially successful director in Hong Kong history. Critics hated him. They called his films vulgar, chaotic, and misogynistic. Wong Jing didn't care. He famously said, "My movies are like potato chips. They aren't healthy, but you can't stop eating them." Wong Jing was a pragmatist in a city of dreamers. He understood the male gaze better than anyone. He knew exactly how to package a woman to maximize her appeal. He didn't just film nudity, he curated it. He created personas. He turned girls into goddesses. But his touch was a double-edged sword. To be a Wong Jing girl, Sing Nui Long, meant instant fame and protection from the triads. Wong had powerful connections, but it also meant being branded with his specific style of sleaze. It meant you belonged to him and to the audience he served. In the early 90s, the Category 3 phenomenon reached its fever pitch. The market was saturated. The audiences were getting bored with the standard fare. They needed something new. They needed a star who wasn't just a body, but a personality. They needed someone who could elevate the genre from the gutter to the penthouse. The stage was set. The trap was baited. The lights were dimmed. Into this overheated, dangerous, and dazzling world stepped a girl with a broken chin and a bruised ego, looking for a way to save face. And a few years later, a girl with a broken heart and an empty stomach looking for a way to survive. The machine was waiting for them, But the machine had never encountered anyone quite like Chingmy Yau. The story of Chingmy Yau does not begin in the gutter. It begins in the deceptive normalcy of the Tung Tao estate in Wong Tai Sin, a dense working-class district of Kowloon where the dreams of the inhabitants were often modest. A stable government job, a small flat, a family that stayed together. Born on May 16, 1968, Chingmy was not the classic tragic heroine of a Hong Kong melodrama. She was, by all accounts, the golden child. She attended the Chetak Public School and later the Salvation Army William Booth Secondary School. She wasn't the rebel smoking cigarettes behind the gymnasium. She was the student body president. She was the girl who organized the dances, the girl who kept her uniform pristine, the girl whose beauty was so self-evident that it felt like a fact of nature rather than an object of desire. In the local vernacular, she was the girl next door, approachable, sweet, and seemingly destined for a quiet, respectable life. But beneath the wholesome exterior lay a burning, unsentimental ambition. Chingmy Yau knew she was beautiful, and more importantly, she knew that in Hong Kong, beauty was a form of currency that could buy a ticket out of the housing estate. In 1987, at the age of 19, she cashed in that ticket. She entered the Miss Hong Kong pageant. But Miss Hong Kong was not merely a beauty contest, it was a national institution. It was a national institution, the undisputed royal court of the colony. The winners were essentially crowned princesses of the city, handed lucrative contracts with TVB, Television Broadcasts Limited, and guaranteed a path to stardom that was paved with respectability. Past winners became icons of elegance. They married into old money. They became the face of charities. This was the path Chingmy chose. It was the clean way up. From the moment she stepped onto the stage, she was the favorite. The press adored her. The judges were captivated. She had a face that camera lenses fell in love with, a perfect heart shape, dominated by large, expressive eyes, and a smile that could oscillate between innocent and mischievous in a nanosecond. She was the presumptive queen, and then the machinery of the industry turned on her. Just days before the final, a story leaked to the tabloids. It was a vicious, specific accusation that struck at the very core of the pageant's obsession with natural beauty. The rumor claimed that Chingmy's chin, that perfect pointy feature that gave her face its distinct character, was fake. They said she had undergone plastic surgery to reshape it. In the cosmetic-enhanced world of 2025, such an accusation would be laughable, perhaps even a badge of honor. But in the conservative, hypocritical atmosphere of 1987 Hong Kong, it was a scandal of nuclear proportions. It implied deceit. It implied vanity. It implied that this perfect girl was a fraud. The source of the leak made the betrayal even more Shakespearean. It was widely rumored to have come from Huang Ying, a fellow contestant and one of Chingmy's closest friends in the competition. Decades later, in 2020, Huang would break her silence to deny this, claiming it was a misunderstanding blown out of proportion by the press, but the damage in 1987 was absolute. Chingmy was cornered. She tried to explain that the scar on her chin was the result of a childhood accident, a fall from a bicycle that required reconstructive medical attention, not cosmetic vanity. But the mob didn't want the truth. They wanted a witch burning. The organizers, terrified of a scandal tarnishing their pristine brand, pressured her. Under the glare of the flashbulbs, the 19-year-old student body president cracked. She couldn't fight the narrative. In a tearful press conference that was broadcast across the city, she withdrew from the pageant. She walked away from the crown that was rightfully hers. It was the first major trauma of her public life, but it was also the moment Chingmy Yau, the innocent girl, died. and Chingmy Yau, the strategist, was born. She learned a brutal lesson that day. Playing by the rules doesn't protect you. The clean path was a lie. If the world was going to call her a fake, she might as well become the greatest fabrication the city had ever seen. Watching this public execution from the sidelines was Wang Jing. While the TVB executives saw a liability, Wang Jing saw a raw diamond. He saw a girl who'd been humiliated and was now desperate for redemption. He saw the fire in her eyes. He signed her immediately. But his initial strategy was surprising. He didn't throw her into the fire right away. He tried to cast her in the mold she wanted, the comedic, bubbly girlfriend. She starred alongside Andy Lau in The Crazy Companies, 1988, playing a silly, lovable character. The film was a hit, but Chingmy was not. She was overshadowed by the more established stars. For several years, she floundered in the pure jade girl archetype, the sweet, sexless ingenue. It wasn't working. The audience didn't want sweet from her anymore. The Chin scandal had tainted her innocence. They knew she had a dark side, and they wanted to see it. In 1992, Wang Jing and Chingmy sat down and looked at the numbers. Another actress, Veronica Yip, had recently shattered the glass ceiling by making the leap from TV to Category 3, causing a sensation. Wang Jing proposed a radical pivot. He told Chingmy, "You can be cute and you will be forgotten, or you can be dangerous and you will be a legend." They crafted a new persona. She would shed the girl next door skin and emerge as the ultimate sex kitten. But Chingmy, showcasing the business acumen that would later define her life, set a condition. It was a non-negotiable clause that would become her trademark. She would never strip completely. She would not do 3 points, a Hong Kong industry term for full frontal nudity. She would show side boob, she would show back, she would wear lingerie that left nothing to the imagination. But the final veil would remain in place. It was a stroke of genius. In an industry where actresses were racing to the bottom, competing to see who could reveal the most, Chingmy Yau went the other way. She created scarcity. She understood that the suggestion of sex is often more powerful than the act of sex. The result was Naked Killer, 1992. To call Naked Killer a movie does it a disservice. It was a cultural detonation. Produced and written by Wang Jing, it was a fever dream of lesbian assassins, castration, and gunplay, wrapped in a glossy MTV aesthetic. Chingmy played Kitty, a young woman trained to kill men who deserve it. The film became an instant cult classic, later championed by Quentin Tarantino. But more importantly, it redefined Chingmy Yau. She was electric. She was fierce, vulnerable, and incredibly sexy. But she maintained an air of high-class detachment. Unlike other Category 3 actresses who looked exploited on camera, Chingmy looked empowered. She looked like she was having fun. She looked like she was in on the joke. It is impossible to overstate the cultural impact of Naked Killer on the global underground. It wasn't just a movie, it was a style manifesto. Wang Jing borrowed the gun fu aesthetics of John Woo and dipped them in neon-soaked fetishism. Western critics, who usually dismissed Hong Kong erotica, were mesmerized. They saw a woman who used her sexuality not as a plea for attention, but as a loaded weapon. In the West, Chingmy became a cult icon, the poster girl for girls with guns. But on the set, the reality was less glamorous. Chingmy was reportedly terrified of the squibs, explosive blood packets, and the physical demands of the action choreography. Yet the moment the camera rolled, the fear vanished, replaced by an icy, lethal stare. This ability to compartmentalize, to shut off the fear, and deliver the performance was the first sign that Chingmy Yau was not just a pretty face. She was a woman of supreme discipline. She became the undisputed queen of sex appeal. But she was a queen who ruled from behind a fortress. Her relationship with Wang Jing evolved from mentor-mentee to a romantic partnership that was the industry's most potent, open secret. For 9 years, they were the power couple of commercial cinema. Wang Jing was obsessed with her. He cast her in everything, from the Royal Tramp blockbusters with Stephen Chow to the gambling epics with Chow Yun-fat. He gave her the best lighting, the best costumes, the best jokes. He protected her from the triads. He protected her from the other wolves. He built a fence around his prize. Rumors swirled that other actresses were jealous of the favoritism. When Shu Qi arrived on the scene later, she would look at Chingmy's position with envy, not for the fame, but for the protection. Chingmy had a patron. She had a shield. But being a muse is a precarious position. It requires constant maintenance. Chingmy had to navigate the jealousy of Wang Jing's legal wife, the scrutiny of the press, and the constant pressure to stay young and relevant. She was living a double life, the fantasy object on screen and the shrewd operator behind the scenes. She proved her acting chops in movies like I'm Your Birthday Cake and Hold You Tight, 1998, earning nominations for Best Actress at the Hong Kong Film Awards. She desperately wanted to be taken seriously, to prove that the Chin Scandal girl was a real artist, and she succeeded to a degree. The critics begrudgingly admitted she had talent, but Chingmy Yau was looking at the clock. By 1997, the landscape was shifting. The handover was happening. The Category 3 boom was busting, replaced by piracy and a changing culture. She was approaching 30, a dangerous age for a sex symbol in a youth-obsessed city. Her relationship with Wang Jing had run its course. The muse dynamic was becoming stifling. So she executed her final greatest maneuver. In 1997, she broke up with Wang Jing. It was clean, swift, and private. She didn't sell her story to the tabloids. She didn't cry on talk shows. She simply walked away from the man who had made her. 2 years later, in 1999, she did the unthinkable. She married Sham Kar Wai, the founder of the IT fashion empire. This was not a typical actress marries rich businessman story. Sham was a self-made tycoon, a man of serious wealth and social standing. In the stratospheric circles of Hong Kong's elite, marrying a Cat 3 actress was considered a risk. It was losing face, the matriarchs of high society would whisper. The business partners would raise eyebrows. The transition was not as smooth as the headlines suggested. Rumors persist to this day about the intense scrutiny Chingmy faced from the conservative elders of the Sham family. To marry into money is one thing, to be accepted by old money is another. Chingmy reportedly had to undergo a rigorous process of image rehabilitation. She stopped wearing revealing clothes even in private. She began attending charity galas, learning the subtle coded language of the elite. She didn't just marry a tycoon, she auditioned for the role of a lifetime, the perfect wife, and she got the part. It was a performance that required more discipline than any role Wang Jing ever gave her. But Chingmy Yau had played the long game perfectly. Because she had never done full nudity, because she had maintained that thin line of mystery, she retained a shred of plausible deniability. She wasn't a porn star. She was an erotic actress. The distinction was microscopic, but in the calculus of high society marriage, it was everything. Her wedding in Japan was the closing ceremony of her career. She didn't just retire, she evaporated. Most actresses claim they are retiring and then pop up in commercials or cameos or reality TV shows a few years later. They crave the oxygen of attention. Chingmy Yau did not. She understood that to truly whitewash her past, she had to starve the public of her present. She became the anti-celebrity. She devoted herself to helping her husband build his empire. Some rumors suggest she even lent him her savings to help list the company on the stock exchange, proving her financial acumen. She gave birth to 3 daughters. She was photographed only occasionally, usually at private events, looking elegant, wealthy, and utterly unbothered. The transformation was total. The girl who was booed off the stage for a fake chin had become the genuine article, a billionaire matriarch. She had beaten the house. She had used the industry's own lust against it, selling them a fantasy while keeping her soul and her future locked in a safe. She proved that in a world of men, the smartest woman is the one who knows exactly when to leave the table. But while Chingmy was sipping champagne in her fortress, another girl was just arriving in Hong Kong, carrying a backpack full of trauma and a heart that was already broken. For her, there would be no strategy, no protection, and no safety net. For Shu Qi, the only way out was through the fire. While Chingmy Yau was busy constructing her fortress of solitude in the high towers of Hong Kong society, a very different story was beginning to unfold in the humid, overcrowded alleys of Taipei. If Chingmy was the princess who fell from grace only to reclaim her crown, Shu Qi was the orphan who had to build a kingdom out of rubble with nothing but her bare hands. Her story is not one of strategy. It is a story of survival. It is visceral, uncomfortable, and deeply human. Born Lin Li Hui on April 16, 1976, she entered the world with none of the advantages Chiang enjoyed. There was no student council presidency, no pristine school uniform, no adoring teachers. Her home was a battlefield. Her family was destitute, struggling to put food on the table in a cramped apartment that smelled of stale alcohol and fear. Her father was not a protector. He was a source of terror. Shu Qi would later recount a chilling detail from her childhood that paints a vivid picture of her domestic reality. She learned to identify her father's mood by the sound of his motorbike engine as he approached the building. If the engine revved aggressively, she knew he was drunk and angry. In those terrifying seconds before the key turned in the lock, she would scramble to hide under a bed, in a closet, anywhere to escape the violence that was coming through the door. Her mother, overwhelmed by poverty and the volatility of her husband, was harsh and distant. Love was a luxury the Lin family could not afford. At 15, unable to bear the suffocating weight of her existence any longer, Shu Qi did what many desperate children do. She ran. She dropped out of high school and hit the streets of Taipei. She was a runaway with a striking face, a wide, sensuous mouth, and eyes that looked perpetually bruised by sadness. It was a face made for cinema, but in the early 90s it was a face that made her a target. To survive, to eat, she began modeling, not for high fashion, but for the soft-core magazines and artistic nude pictorials that were sold under the counter. She wasn't chasing fame, she was chasing a meal ticket. It was these photos, raw and unpolished, that caught the eye of the Hong Kong talent scouts, specifically Manfred Wong and the omnipresent Wang Jing. They saw a wildness in her that felt authentic. They offered her a ticket to Hong Kong. She arrived in the city in 1996 at the age of 17, though her age was often fudged by managers. She was alone. She didn't speak Cantonese fluently. She had no family, no friends, and no leverage. When the contracts were placed in front of her, filled with clauses about nudity and exploitation, she signed them. She later admitted she didn't even fully understand what she was agreeing to. She just knew it was more money than she had ever seen in Taiwan. Her debut was a baptism by fire. She was cast in Sex and Zen 2, 1996. Unlike the classy erotica Chingmy Yau was allowed to make, Sex and Zen 2 was crude, explicit, and dehumanizing. Shu Qi was paraded before the camera as a piece of meat. There was no full nudity clause for the girl from Taiwan. She bared everything. The shoot was a nightmare. Stories from the set describe a young girl who would weep in her dressing room between takes, only to dry her tears, put on a seductive smile, and walk back out to be ogled by a crew of indifferent men. She was being consumed. The film was a hit, and Shu Qi became famous overnight. But it was a poisoned fame. In the conservative, judgmental culture of Hong Kong, she was instantly branded. She wasn't a star. She was a Cat 3 girl. It was a label that stuck to her skin like tar. The humiliation spilled out onto the streets. There is a famous, heartbreaking anecdote from this period. Shu Qi was walking in Central, perhaps trying to enjoy a rare moment of anonymity, when a passing truck driver recognized her. He leaned out of his window and screamed, "Take it off! Strip!" The pedestrians laughed. Shu Qi kept walking, head down, burning with shame. She realized then that to the world, she wasn't a person. She was a public utility, a body that belonged to everyone but herself. The psychological toll was compounded by the physical danger of the era. This was a time when triad members would storm film sets, demanding protection money or forcing actors to work overtime without pay. For a young girl from Taiwan with no connections, the set was a place of constant low-level terror. Shu Qi later confessed in rare interviews that during her first years in Hong Kong, she would go home to her tiny rented apartment, stare at the ceiling, and drink herself to sleep, just to numb the noise of the day. She had no friends. She had no family. She only had the camera, and the camera was a hungry beast. The loneliness of Shu Qi in 1996 is a sharp contrast to the crowded, noisy scenes she filmed. She was the most desired woman in Hong Kong, yet she was arguably the loneliest person in the city. This could have been the end of the story. For hundreds of other girls it was. They made their money, got chewed up by the stigma, and vanished into drugs or depression. But Shu Qi possessed a spine of steel forged in the fires of her abusive childhood. She made a vow to herself, a promise that has become legendary in the annals of Chinese cinema. I will put my clothes back on, one piece at a time. The turning point came later that same year, in 1996, with a film called Viva Erotica. In a stroke of metafictional genius, director Derek Yee cast Shu Qi to play a fictionalized version of herself, a struggling Category 3 actress from Taiwan who is trying to maintain her dignity while working in the porn industry. It was a risky role. It required her to confront her own reality on screen. Opposite her was Leslie Cheung, the king of cantopop, and a man known for his immense empathy. Leslie didn't treat her like a porn star. He treated her like an equal. He mentored her on set, protecting her and encouraging her to dig deep into her pain. The chemistry between them was transformative. Leslie Cheung, who was battling his own demons regarding public perception and sexuality, saw a kindred spirit in the young actress. He famously told the crew, "Treat her with respect. She is an actress, not a prop." For Shu Qi, who was used to being treated like perishable meat, this kindness was a shock to the system. It gave her permission to take herself seriously. There is a specific scene in Viva Erotica that critics point to as the moment Shu Qi the star was born. It is a quiet moment stripped of nudity, where her eyes convey a weariness far beyond her 20 years. It was no longer a performance. It was a plea for dignity broadcast in 35mm. She won the Best Supporting Actress award at the Hong Kong Film Awards. It was unprecedented. A Cat 3 actress winning a prestigious acting prize for playing a Cat 3 actress. It was the first garment she put back on. But the industry and the public have long memories. The road to redemption was paved with broken glass. her love life, became the next battlefield. In 1998, she began a relationship with Leon Lai, one of the 4 heavenly kings. He was the Prince Charming of Hong Kong pop culture, handsome, clean-cut, adored by millions. Their romance was intense, lasting nearly 7 years, but it was lived in the shadows. Leon Lai's fans were venomous. They viewed Shu Qi as a stain on his perfection. They sent her hate mail. They booed her. And reportedly, Leon's own father vehemently opposed the relationship, refusing to accept a woman with her past into the family. Leon, caught between his love and his image, never publicly acknowledged her as his girlfriend. For 7 years, Shu Qi was the secret lover, the woman good enough to hold in private, but not good enough to hold hands with in public. The breakup in 2004 devastated her. It confirmed her deepest fear that no matter how many awards she won, she would always be dirty in the eyes of the establishment. Broken-hearted, Shu Qi threw herself into her work with a terrifying intensity. She stopped chasing commercial hits and sought out the artists, the directors, who didn't care about box office numbers, but cared about truth. She found her true artistic father in Ho Xiaoxian, the legendary Taiwanese auteur. He didn't want her nudity, he wanted her silence. He cast her in Millennium Mambo 2001, a hypnotic drifting film about a lost young woman in Taipei. The opening shot of that film, Shu Qi walking through a tunnel in slow motion, looking back at the camera with a cigarette in her hand and a galaxy of sorrow in her eyes, is one of the most iconic images of 21st century cinema. Who pushed her to her limits. He stripped away her acting tricks, her cute mannerisms, and forced her to just be. In 3 times, 2005, she played 3 different women in 3 different eras. It was a tour de force. At the 2005 Golden Horse Awards in Taiwan, when her name was announced as the winner of Best Actress, Shu Qi didn't just walk to the stage, she wept. She cried uncontrollably. It wasn't the polite tearing up of a Hollywood starlet. It was the heaving sobs of a soldier who had just survived a war. Every tear was a rebuke to the men who had exploited her, to the fans who had insulted her, to the father who had terrified her. She had done it. She had forced the Mandarin-speaking world to bow to her talent. But her journey wasn't just local. She went global. She learned English to star in The Transporter, 2002, alongside Jason Statham. She became a jury member at the Berlin Film Festival at Cannes, at Venice. She became the face of luxury brands like Bulgari and Armani, brands that sell elegance, not sex. Yet, unlike Chingmy Yau, Shu Qi never hid her scars. She spoke openly about her depression. She posted photos of her severe skin allergies on social media, refusing to maintain a facade of perfection. She let the world see that the climb had hurt her. In 2016, at the age of 40, she finally found her happy ending, but it was on her own terms. She married Stephen Fung, a director and actor she had known for 20 years. There was no billion-dollar wedding. There was no grand banquet. They got married in a rush while filming a movie in Prague, wearing clothes bought from a street stall. They released a simple statement: "Our marriage is simple. Our decision is sudden. We have known each other for 20 years and been in love for 4 years." It was the ultimate act of freedom. She didn't marry a tycoon to save her. She married her best friend because she wanted to. Shu Qi's life is a testament to the idea that dignity is not something you are given. It is something you take. She walked through the fire of the pink trap and emerged, not as a princess, but as a phoenix. She burned the past to fuel her future. But as we stand back and admire her wings, we must ask ourselves, why was the fire necessary in the first place? Why does a woman have to bleed to be respected? As we move to compare these 2 extraordinary lives, we see the diverging paths clearly. One chose the fortress, the other chose the battlefield. Both survived. But the definition of survival is vastly different for the girl with the plan and the girl with the scars. If we step back from the individual dramas of Chingmy Yau and Shu Qi, a striking diptych emerges. Placed side by side, their lives form a perfect mirror image of the female experience in the Hong Kong entertainment industry. They are two different answers to the same brutal question: how does a woman survive when her value is reduced to her body? Both women began their journeys in the same neon-lit purgatory. They were both young, beautiful, and trapped in an ecosystem designed to exploit them. They both signed contracts with the same men, the Wang Jings and the Manfred Wongs of the world, who saw them as commodities to be packaged and sold. To the casual observer in 1995, they were indistinguishable, just two more Cat 3 girls destined for the scrap heap. But as the pressure mounted, they broke in opposite directions. Chingmy Yau represents the strategy of erasure. She understood early on that in a patriarchal society, respectability is a finite resource for a woman. Once it is lost, it is almost impossible to regain within the public sphere. So she treated her career in erotica not as a calling, but as a heist. She broke into the vault of fame, took the cash, and then burned the getaway car. Her genius lay in her calculation. By refusing full nudity, she kept a relentless grip on her own mystery. By retiring at the absolute peak of her beauty in 1997, she denied the public the satisfaction of seeing her age or decline. And by marrying into the old world legitimacy of a billion-dollar business empire, she effectively purchased a new identity. Chingmy's path was the pragmatic victory. She played by the rules of the patriarchy. She knew that to be a good wife and a respected mother, the bad girl had to die. So she killed her. The actress Chingmy Yau ceased to exist so that Mrs. Sham could live. It was a transaction of breathtaking discipline. She traded her artistic voice for safety. She traded the adoration of fans for the security of a fortress. Today she is a ghost in her own city, seen but never heard. She won the game by quitting it before the house could take back its winnings. Shu Qi, conversely, represents the strategy of transmutation. She did not have the luxury of erasure. Her past was too exposed. Her trauma was too public. She couldn't hide, so she chose to stand and fight. Her path was the artistic redemption. Instead of running from the stigma, she walked directly into it. She took the shame of her early career and used it as fuel for her performances. When she cries on screen in 3 Times or The Assassin, we are not just watching a character, we are watching Shu Qi channeling the pain of the girl who was shouted at by truck drivers in Central. Shu Qi forced the world to change its definition of her. She didn't become a respectable wife to gain status. She became a master. She won her respectability through the undeniable weight of her talent. She proved that a woman can be soiled by society's standards and still rise to become royalty. But she paid a tax that Chingmy avoided. She paid with her mental health. She paid with decades of loneliness. She paid with the physical toll of being a public target for 20 years. The comparison of these two women also shines a harsh spotlight on the gender double standard of the industry. Consider the men who built their fortunes on the backs of Chingmy Yau and Shu Qi. Wang Jing, the architect of the Category 3 boom, was never stigmatized. He was never called a pornographer with the same venom used against his actresses. He was called a commercial genius. He is still celebrated today as a titan of cinema. The men who watch the movies, who consume the bodies of these women, face no social penalty. They could walk out of the theater and go back to their respectable jobs. Only the women carried the stain. Chingmy Yau and Shu Qi had to spend their entire adult lives navigating a shame that was manufactured by men, sold by men, and consumed by men. One chose to wash it off in private, the other chose to wear it until it became armor. This divergence reveals a profound truth about the choices available to women in the 90s, and perhaps even today. The Chingmy root suggests that safety lies in conformity, in finding a protector, in retreating to the domestic sphere. It is a validation of traditional values. Marry well, and you will be safe. The Shu Qi root suggests that freedom lies in independence, in professional excellence, and in the refusal to be defined by a man. But it also warns us that this path is lonely and exhausting. It is a validation of modern feminist resilience. Work hard, and you will be free, but you will be tired. As we approach the end of their stories, we are left with a lingering question. We look at Chingmy Yau, the ageless billionaire matriarch, safe behind her high walls. We look at Shu Qi, the celebrated artist, smiling on the red carpet with the wisdom of a survivor. They both escaped the trap. They both beat the odds. But who is the true winner? Is it the woman who has everything the world tells her to want? Or is it the woman who became everything she herself wanted to be? The answer is not as simple as it seems, because in the end, the only person who knows the true cost of the ticket is the one who took the ride. To answer this, we must look beyond the glossy magazine covers and the red carpet photos. We must look at the silence that surrounds them. Consider the silence of Chingmy Yau. In the bustling, gossip-hungry ecosystem of Hong Kong, Chingmy is a phantom. She is seen, but she is not heard. Occasionally, a paparazzi lens will catch her in the wild, usually in the upscale boutiques of Causeway Bay or dining in a private room at a 5-star hotel. The headlines are always the same. Chingmy Yau, 56, looks like she is 30. The ageless goddess, the billionaire wife. On the surface, she is the undisputed victor. She achieved the Hong Kong dream in its purest form. She converted the volatile, dirty currency of sex appeal into the solid gold of social status. She secured the bag, raised the dynasty, and kept her face. She lives in a fortress of comfort that 99% of the human population can only dream of. But there is a melancholy in her perfection. Chingmy Yau spent the first half of her life pretending to be something she wasn't. A sex kitten, a bimbo, a fantasy. She spent the second half of her life ensuring that no one remembers that version of her. Her life is a masterclass in erasure. She killed the artist to save the woman. We will never know the depth of her acting talent. We will never see her play a grandmother, a villain, or a grieving widow. We will never hear her voice her own story, because to speak is to remind the world of the voice she used to have. She is a bird in a gilded cage of her own design, safe from the predators, but forever grounded. Her victory is the victory of the statue, beautiful, admired, and stone-cold silent. Now consider the silence of Shu Qi. Her silence is different. It is the silence of the ocean after a storm. It is a silence that has earned the right to exist. Shu Qi did not erase her past, she integrated it. When you look at her face today in her late 40s, you see the lines, you see the shadow of the girl who wept in the dressing room of Sex and Zen. You see the defiance of the woman who walked through the tunnel in Millennium Mambo. She carries her history with a weary grace. She won the game of art. She forced the cultural establishment, the critics, the festivals, the luxury brands to bend the knee. She proved that a woman is not disposable. She proved that purity is a myth used to control women and that resilience is the only true virtue. But the cost of her victory is etched in her nervous system. The chronic allergies, the bouts of insomnia, the years of public loneliness. These are the taxes paid on her freedom. She lives with the flesh memory of exploitation. Every time a camera clicks, a part of her must surely remember the time when the lens was a weapon, not a tribute. So, who is the winner? If the goal of life is safety, Chingmy Yau won. She played the system and beat the house. She represents the triumph of pragmatism. If the goal of life is truth, Shu Qi won. She broke the system and built a new one. She represents the triumph of authenticity. But perhaps the tragedy lies in the fact that they had to choose it all. The story of Chingmy Yau and Shu Qi is not just a tale of two actresses. It is a damning indictment of the world that made them. It is a story about the pink trap, the societal mechanism that demands women be sexual for men's pleasure and then punishes them for it. In the 1990s, the trap was made of celluloid and VHS tapes. Today, the technology has changed. It is Instagram, it is OnlyFans, it is TikTok, but the mechanics are identical. Young women are still told that their beauty is their capital. They are still encouraged to sell it. And they are still told that once it is sold, they can never buy it back. Chingmy and Shu Qi are the survivors of a shipwreck. They swam to different islands. One island is a walled garden, the other is a wild open plain. But they both look out at the same ocean, the ocean of a past that tried to drown them. As we close the book on the golden age of Category 3, we must recognize that these films were not just trash. They were documentaries of desperation. They captured the hunger of a city running out of time and the sacrifices of the women who were thrown into the engine to keep it running. The neon lights of 1997 have long since flickered out. The video stores are gone, replaced by streaming algorithms. The triads have moved from film sets to boardrooms, but the legacy of the goddess and the phoenix remains. They remind us that redemption is not something you are given by a forgiving public. It is something you claw out of the rock with your own fingernails. Chingmy Yau teaches us that sometimes the only way to win the war is to leave the battlefield and never look back. Shu Qi teaches us that if you stay and fight, you might get scarred, but you will find out who you really are. In the final analysis, there are no winners in a game that was rigged from the start. There are only those who survived. And as the fog rolls in over Victoria Harbor, obscuring the skyline of the city they both conquered, we are left with the image of two women standing at the crossroads of history. One turned right into the quiet embrace of oblivion. The other turned left into the harsh light of immortality. And the audience? We are left in the dark, wondering which path we would have the courage to take.